So I'm Akshara, and I'm a Wagner student pursuing my MPA in International Development. And I would first like to echo all the thank yous that Esther started with, and to obviously Professor Vasuki and Mehmet. And I would also like to thank Professor Kathleen Appletower for her help and her support and her guidance throughout the international to the independent study. Um, yeah, there we go. My work was on women and informal work, and I worked with ActionAid India in New Delhi. And so First, I want to start with what is ActionAid and why ActionAid. So ActionAid is an international non-governmental organization that has been in India for the past 4 decades. It's well networked. It's almost in every state. That's 24 states and 2 of the union territories of India. I basically went to ActionAid because I had worked with ActionAid about 3 years ago. I had worked on a project that they were doing on caste discrimination in rural northern Indian primary schools. And at that time, I had appreciated the importance they give to marginalized communities, and I liked that was sort of the lens that they used for evaluation. That's something that I want to incorporate in my own career and how I conduct research in the future. And ActionAid is also well networked with a number of civil society organizations and grassroots organizations in India, and they believe in community-driven solutions and or bolstering already present governmental programs rather than imposing um, um, their own programs. So another reason that obviously I chose ActionAid was because this time they were working on women in the informal sector. My supervisor for the past study, Ms. Smita Khanija, was the national thematic lead on this. And obviously one of the reasons was I chose it was because of her, because she believes in a collaborative spirit when we work, even when I come in as an intern, and a democratic workplace. I'm also passionate about women in the informal sector as a student of international development, and also because uh, women working in India is almost synonymous with this concept of women working in the informal sector, just because of the overwhelming majority of women who are working in the informal sector in India. That is 94% of working women are in the informal sector. And they are invisibilized by how we measure things in the current global political economy. They are not in the GDP, they are not in the GNP or in any of that. And they are also, because of this sort of beyond the reach of, of even like a human rights network or framework or any kind of legal restrictions that we can put in place to curb exploitation and so on. Another reason was, and something that came up both in our seminar with Professor Vasuki and also within the work in the literature review that I was conducting for ActionAid, was women, this idea of women in development as mutually reinforcing ideas, or this idea of women as development that can be seen in many Millennium Development Goals and other things where they kind of adopt this idea of mainstream feminism, sort of the 1970s feminist idea that work and women entering the labor force in itself is seen as liberation. And especially when you look at the informal sector in India, it becomes apparent how closely such a liberation actually resembles exploitation, and how such ideas can also lead you to kind of give lesser attention to this the importance of social securities. Um, so obviously, even though we couldn't have seen this coming, but COVID changed the initial ideas of how I thought this research would be conducted, and a lot of my research was steered towards COVID and its compounded impacts on women. COVID, I mean, we kind of saw it happen. It's the reason that we are not together in a room today. It's the reason we sort of saw it unfold in real time with our seminars and our independent studies, starting with us in the same room, and our lively discussions suddenly were halted, and we had to go behind our computers and into our rooms. But we adapted, and we were able to restart that. But obviously, for if our work dependent on our physical bodies, that would have been difficult. And that is what informal women workers are facing in India currently. And these were some of the ideas and the issues that came forward in the webinars that I hosted in my internship along with ActionAid. So this was the graphs that I'm going to now show you are directly from the ActionAid study that was conducted this summer, and we were able to reach about 3,000 women workers in these fields. So the livelihood loss is obviously a lot. It is especially large for agricultural laborers, and such a trend in losses for agricultural laborers had already started pre-COVID, but was obviously compounded because of it. And in this graph, we can see that there has been dramatic declines in employment, and though the women seeking work has actually not increased in proportion to how many of them have actually lost their jobs. And this can be attributed to many different things, such as the double burden that women face in their homes. So this is a cartoon that actually my dad had made, and this is about the unique ID authority of India, and this is the mythological figure, Ravana, who has 10 heads in India. And so what this cartoon is trying to say is that when the unique ID authority of India goes into the household of Ravana and sees him with 10 heads, he's kind of confronted with the complexity of Indian identities and of India itself as a nation, and how difficult something that is equivalent to a social security number can be in India. The only thing I would like to add to this cartoon is obviously it would probably be more difficult to assign a unique ID if Ravana had been a woman. And I say so because cards that the government has made mandatory pretty recently for public distribution systems actually comes with this gender blind idea of how these cards are distributed. And this is especially important when we look at things like the Kisan card, where women aren't seen as farmers themselves, but as seen as helping their husbands. So any gender blind distribution of such cards only leads to further propagation of gender inequities. I'll only be focusing on the ration card and the Aadhaar card, and that's the part that I studied in my internship too. And what can be seen is that the beneficiary ratio, even for those who are enrolled in such cards, is very low. The fact that the government has made it mandatory to have such cards to get any sort of like free food or grains, any kind of any other kind of social security net has been already deemed as anti-poor by many economists, and it very much is so. It's also important to note in this graph that these numbers are only for those who have already been enrolled. So already the numbers, when they are low, it's even lower for the waste workers or domestic workers and helpers in general. So some reflections and questions going ahead. Something that was very important to me that I remembered obviously was my positionality as I spoke Hindi and I am Indian, so that helped me when I was talking to various union leaders during any of our webinars. But I also would just want to be conscious even going forth of my identity as a Brahmin woman, and how I can navigate that even better in the future. The political climate has been changing with the Modi government accusing very recently ActionAid, that is saying that it has reduced the Indian GDP by 4% or some absurd number, and it's obviously not true, but it's a larger trend of how NGOs and human rights organizations are being attacked. Then how to define development with respect to women and wages versus social security. COVID has especially, and in my study, it became very obvious that uh, that wage, just a minimum wage is not going to be enough in an informal sector where there are hardly any contracts, and when jobs evaporate, social security nets are an absolute must. That I feel like there are gaps in research, and I feel like I can increase my scope. For instance, sex workers need to be included in such a study, and they hadn't been before, and how the international human rights framework and the transitional justice framework can met out reparations to even victims of economic systems. Thank you. That's my time.